So yes, this week was Gamescom. We put out a couple of videos this week talking about Resident Evil Requiem and Pragmata, as we say with Rich. Pragmata from Capcom. We talked about the high-end PC experience that we observed at the NVIDIA booth, right, Alex?
Right.
That was fun. It was great to see it. We saw the path tracer in action in Resident Evil. Looks insane. But of course, you read the comments under it, and they're actually good. They're perfectly reasonable here, where people are like, okay, well, you're talking about this high end experience running on a 5090. That doesn't bode well for the other systems. Like we made a comment about how, say, Resident Evil Requiem wouldn't work well with SSR, and they're like, well, I guess that means consoles will have SSR. Uh, but thankfully, I've played all these on PS5, including Onimusha, by the way, and I actually have impressions. So I actually want to start with Resident Evil Requiem.
On PS5 Pro,
And
by the way.
yes, so everything here running on PS5 Pro, the professional. Um, it's excellent. So it does have the full suite of ray tracing features here, including the RT reflections. It looks glorious. Now, obviously, if you know, especially if you know where to look, you're not going to get that extreme granularity and perfect precision of a path tracer, right? But what they've done here artistically and the ray tracing they are using is very robust. Everything looks excellent. And best of all, it was a full, completely stable 60 frames per second. So this version looked great. Image quality was good. Performance was good. The main difference that you might notice, especially with reflections, is things like you lose a lot of that like extreme sharpness and clarity that you get. Like the way I think they were using, there was a little. That's right. There was a little bit of noise, but the ray reconstruction in the Path Tracer version was still pretty good, I would say. Right. Obviously, you're not going to get that level of clarity here in the console. Reflections smear a little bit more, especially in mirrors. But honestly, I think most users will be very happy here, and it's genuinely stunning looking. Which is why I'm not confident. I believe this is a current gen only game. Like unlike what Capcom's done before, don't expect a PS4 version. Don't expect Xbox One. Certainly not Xbox One. This is going to be current gen only. I'm going to put that out there, and we'll see if it sticks. But I think they have fully went all in on ray tracing with this game, and the whole vision about what they're doing with the visuals is derived from that ray tracing feature set. So it's good. And I think this demo is just a tiny teaser. I believe the full game will be much larger in scope. I don't think it's just going to be limited to like little hallways and hiding from creatures, right? But I will say the footage we have here that we captured was captured only at 1080p. Image quality was actually much better than this, but it was limited by the capture device we used, so you get an idea of what we saw. The only thing that really dragged it down, and Alex, you saw this as well, is the booth. That's whoever set up the booth for Capcom. They used a bunch of Samsung LCDs that were frankly abysmal.
They were bad.
They were extremely bad, like horrible black levels. They had this issue where like genuine smearing trailing behind stuff, and the type where like if you have like a dark scene, you turn one way and you get pink trails, you turn the other way, you get yellow trails. It was just this like it was really really bad, and that's not the game's fault. That was the screens. So if you played it there and you thought there was a lot of muddiness to the image and the dark scenes, this is the fault of the display, not the game. So next I want to talk about Pragmata, because this was another game we saw on PC, right, Alex?
Right.
And this one as well is 60 frames per second. So it has the full ray tracing suite, which RT reflections, and what actually were they
RTGI?
doing art? I think they might have been doing RTGI as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it is there once again, super clean, looks great. It's exactly what I had hoped for. And I already gave my impressions in the game. I really, really like this game. It was one of my favorite things at the entire show. But the key here is that on PS5 Pro, outside of a couple little dips and cutscenes, it was a very stable 60 frames per second throughout, right? So that's key. Even in the pre-release phase, both of these games running great. They both have the full RT setup. No problems there. Then we come to Onimusha, and this one is the one I would say feels a little bit more unfinished, so to speak. So the game itself is phenomenally cool. It does play It's Onimusha, but with obviously some pretty big changes to certain things about the progression and the way it actually handles. But the animation work, the environments, the level of detail, it's all beautiful. But they do not seem to be leveraging many, if any, of Reach for the Moon, the RE engine's ray tracing features. That's right, Alex. We didn't actually observe anything that seemed like actual RT in this game.
No, it looked very. There was no There was SSR on the PS5 Pro version you had.
Yep.
And I mean, it's a little hard to diagnose something like RTGI without like a lot of investigation sometimes. But like there, it also just kind of looked SSAOE. Yeah.
And that's so you say, okay, that's fine. A lot of the audience does not like ray tracing. But here's the thing: is that we noticed in the pre-release build, the frame rate was still not that stable. So we're waiting to see now. Of course, still in development. But I was surprised to see that the one game that didn't have ray tracing was the one that was running the slowest currently. But when I say slowest, it was more like 55 to 60 FPS currently. And I think, VRR would clean it up. And in fact, you saw the Xbox version, which had VRR on.
Right. Otherwise, like the Xbox version looked a lot like the PS5 Pro version, but the PS5 Pro one wasn't using the interlacing that the engine uses. The Xbox one looked like, if I had to just say what it looked like to me, it looked like sub 4K, output resolution that was interlaced. So we've seen that in actually a good number of the Capcom titles as of late. But it just looked a very kind of blurry presentation in that aspect. But other than that, I was playing with VRR, and you could see that it was adjusting VRR just because sometimes if you have an eye for those things, you can see it. But with VRR on the Xbox Series X, it was never distracting. I don't obviously know what the real output frame rate was, but it was on that console with VRR on, it was fine.
And Capcom has a good track record of also implementing VR on the PlayStations, but the reason it wouldn't have been on in this case is because it was looped through a capture device. So in order to capture the game, you're disabling VRR, and that's what they did. I would say on the PS5 Pro, though, it would feel very smooth. Even if it shipped just like this, if you had VRR, it'd be fine. But I hope that by the time they hit release, they can smooth out these last little bits, because they're very close. They're very close. And I hope they get it, because I really enjoyed playing, especially the boss fight they had. They did this like amazing choreography for the animation as he moved around, and just like the cloth flowing, the animation work, and clashing swords, it just looked incredible. So I'm really, really excited for this one. Again, though, it was a little bit marred because it's a dark, misty kind of demo. Those LCD screens, man.
Those ones are really bad. The Xbox booth had way better screens, so that's the way it is. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that's that. It's looking great. I mean, Capcom's lineup right now is honestly nuts. It's crazy good. Like, we have a revival of a classic IP with Onimusha. We have the next Resident Evil game, which is a brand new one, and then we have a completely new IP, which was one of my favorite things at the entire show. Like, that is an enviable position to be in for any publisher, I would say. But before we move on, Oliver, I figured I'd at least ask you. You were not able to play these games since you were working hard off-site. But what are your thoughts on what you've seen so far from any of these titles, actually?
I actually took a little bit of a look at RE Requiem because I did the edit on that video on the PC side of things, and I have the console footage now on the PS5 Pro. And I did actually do like a little lineup here.
Oh, cool.
In that kind of opening cutscene.
Yeah. Nice.
So I do see that the PC version does look quite a bit better in these side-by-sides, where I think you're seeing the advantage of much more significant RT in that path-traced version, where like you get correct specular highlights and everything. That's something I noticed. Correct specularity, correct direction, all that good stuff. Shadows that diffuse correctly as they fall away from the casting object. So on PS5 Pro, I presume it's just shadow maps. On PC, I presume RT shadows there. And the lighting in the room also just looks much more dynamic and lively. And the Pro looks kind of gray and diffuse, kind of that RE engine look. But there's also, I think there's a bit of a gamma difference as well between the two versions. On PC, it looks much punchier, contrastier, the blacks are properly kind of at that 0, 0 point. They're properly black. The highlights are quite bright. Now, I don't know exactly like if maybe one's mapped from HDR or something like that. That could happen in a lot of cases, right? Depending on how this is going.
I actually think that's the case, Oliver. Due to the way they set up the capture, I'm fairly certain that the settings didn't quite match. I wouldn't judge any.
No, I'm not judging. Yeah. I'm just, if you adjust it, you can get them kind of into closer bounds there, and then I think you more fairly see the differences where it's like maybe this is coming from different RT here or there. But yeah, just a note here that kind of grayed out look is probably not indicative of how the two games are meant to look and be displayed. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty cool showing here. Pragmata also looks very good, I would say. Those RT reflections everywhere. That's definitely a new thing for RE Engine to have, like, you know, a room with like 6 sides and every side is perfectly reflective. Very cool. And then Onimusha, that is a very kind of gray, lifted blacks kind of thing. But again, who knows how that is supposed to look on an actual proper monitor that's properly configured, that isn't like capture that might be sourced from an HDR source or something, right? So
I really think, like, companies, when you're coming to trade shows like this is genuinely really something that needs to be thought better of. NVIDIA did this. In their booth, they supplied all their stations with these gorgeous OLED monitors, right? Mm-hmm. They have deep pockets, I get it. But for renting out displays for trade shows, like, they made the right choice there, that anybody that sits down in that, they're going to get that eye-popping experience that you only get with an OLED screen, with a really bright, like, pop, but then like ultra rich blacks. And it makes a gigantic difference in terms of the perception of what you're seeing. And I really think other publishers should really consider this and look at this when they're renting these spaces, building these booths. Like, the display matters way more than you might think. It's more, the display is what is going to fill in that last 25% of somebody's visual impression of a game. So using a cheap LCD, like nearly every booth did at the show floor, it's not a good choice. So hopefully they can sort that in the future, because I think not everybody's going to be aware of the technical reasons of why one thing looks the way it does. And they're more likely to chalk it up to the game rather than the monitor, even though the monitor is what's at fault.